Hello, my name is Jeremy Whitfield. I'm 33 years old, living in the suburbs of Chicago, where quiet streets stretch under the shade of old oak trees and sunsets often bathe wooden rooftops in golden hues. If you asked me who I am, I'd say I'm just an ordinary guy. Nothing special, just a steady job, a small, warm family, and a firm belief that if I try hard enough, everything will turn out fine. I've never been the type to chase the spotlight, but deep down, I take pride in what I've built. You might look at my life right now and think I'm living the perfect dream. But life, as I've come to realize, is never as simple as a pre-painted picture. I work at Sterling & Rowe Investments, a financial firm headquartered in the heart of Chicago, where gleaming glass skyscrapers reflect the city's bustling rhythm. My job is as a financial analyst. A dry role perhaps, but to me it's like an engrossing puzzle. Every day I sit in front of a computer screen, sifting through endless streams of numbers, analyzing market trends, and turning them into sharp, concise reports. I've often heard the board praise our department's outstanding reports during meetings. I'm not sure if those compliments are meant for me, but I don't need them to feel proud. For me, completing a flawless data set or accurately predicting an investment trend is reward enough. If my job is where I find stability, my family is my heart. Every evening as I drive through the suburban streets, leaving the city's noise behind, I feel like I'm entering another world, a warm one, where Vanessa and Sophia are waiting for me. Vanessa, my wife, is the kind of woman who turns heads wherever she goes. She's beautiful with glossy brown hair and sharp eyes that seem to see through everything. She works for a well-known fashion brand, and I've always admired how she handles her job with confidence and finesse. Vanessa is the type who always knows what she wants and isn't afraid to speak her mind. On days when I'm exhausted, just hearing her resolute voice is enough to recharge me. Then there's Sophia, our 6-year-old daughter, who is my entire world. She has her mother's big round eyes and a smile that melts me every time I see it. Every evening when I open the door, Sophia comes running, wrapping her arms around my legs and shouting, "Daddy's home. Tell me a story." Those moments, I swear, are why I live. I'll scoop her up, let her sit on my shoulders, and we'll sing some silly song while Vanessa shoots us a playful glare from the kitchen. Our home, though just a modest house we're paying off in the suburbs, is a castle to me. It's not grand, but it's enough to hold our laughter, cozy family dinners, and lazy weekend mornings when the three of us curl up on the couch watching cartoons. This house is my pride. I've worked tirelessly to pay off every loan, every bill, to ensure Vanessa and Sophia never have to worry. Each month, I carefully review our finances, calculate expenses, and make sure everything is under control. I'm not the type to splurge or dream of luxuries. To me, happiness is watching Sophia scamper around our small backyard garden or seeing Vanessa smile with satisfaction at the newly renovated kitchen we worked hard for. Beyond my little family, I also have responsibilities toward my parents, Warren and Eleanor Whitfield. They live not far from us in a peaceful neighborhood for retirees. My father, Warren, is a stern man, proud of what he's accomplished in life, from building a stable career to raising my sister and me. My mother, Eleanor, is gentler but often lets my father take the lead. I try to help them out, even if it's just small monthly contributions to support their expenses. To me, it's a son's duty, a way to repay the years they spent raising me. To neighbors and friends, I'm probably seen as a lucky guy. "Jeremy, you've got it all," an old friend once told me at a weekend barbecue. "Good job, beautiful wife, great kid. What's there to complain about?" I just smiled, raised my beer, and nodded. They're not wrong. I have a stable job, a happy family, and a life many would envy. I don't dream of bigger houses, fancier cars, or a higher position at work. I just want to keep things as they are. Peaceful, safe, and whole. I want Sophia to grow up in a home where she always feels loved, Vanessa to remain the strong woman by my side, and myself to never have to worry about losing what we have. Some nights, as I sit alone in the living room, the soft glow of a lamp illuminating the family photo on the shelf, Vanessa, Sophia, and me beaming during a park outing, I feel an indescribable happiness. I've worked tirelessly, not to be the best, but to build a solid foundation for those I love. I believe that as long as I keep trying, as long as I maintain the care and patience I put into my work, nothing can break this happiness. This house, this family, this life, it's all the result of years of sweat and dedication, and I truly believe it will last forever. But life, as I said, is never a finished painting. What I thought was a solid foundation turned out to be more fragile than I imagined. The numbers I love, the reports I meticulously prepare, and the home I poured my heart into building, all of it can crumble in a single moment. And when that moment comes, I realize that happiness, no matter how perfect it seems, is never something I can hold with certainty. That day started like any other. I woke up at 6 in the morning, brewed coffee in the kitchen, still lingering with the scent of Vanessa's toasted bread from breakfast, and kissed Sophia on the forehead before she ran out to catch the school bus. I drove to Sterling and Rowe Investments, merging into Chicago's bustling traffic, where gleaming glass skyscrapers stood like cold giants. My office was on the 14th floor, a small corner with an old wooden desk and a computer screen filled with numbers. I'd spent 8 years there, hunched over spreadsheets, analyzing investment trends and preparing reports that I'd heard were highly regarded by senior management, though I was never the one to receive praise directly. I just did my job, believing my hard work would be recognized through results. I never thought that day would be different. Around 10 in the morning, I received a brief email from HR. Jeremy Whitfield, please come to meeting room 3 at 10:30 a.m. to discuss some changes in the company structure. No details, no hints. I shrugged, assuming it was a routine meeting, maybe about resource reallocation or a new project. I grabbed my coffee mug, walked into the meeting room with my usual calm demeanor, ready to approach it as I always did my work, carefully, composed, and prepared. But when the meeting room door closed behind me, I sensed something was wrong. The air felt heavy, as if someone had sucked out all the oxygen. My manager, Gavin Mercer, sat at the head of the table, his eyes sharp as razors. Next to him was an HR employee I'd only met a few times, a young woman with averted eyes clutching a stack of documents tightly. "Sit down, Jeremy," Gavin said, his tone smooth but laced with a falseness I hadn't noticed before. I sat, feeling like I was entering a game where I didn't know the rules. "We've had discussions," Gavin began, his voice flat like he was reading a script. "The company is restructuring to optimize efficiency. Unfortunately, your position is no longer needed." The words "no longer needed" hit me like a knife to the chest. I blinked, trying to process what I'd just heard. "No longer needed?" I repeated, my voice hoarse, unsure if I was asking a question or just trying to stay calm. "What do you mean?" "I've been here 8 years, Gavin. 8 years of dedication, the reports I've done, the analyses I've prepared for the team. They've helped us secure so many contracts, so many successful projects. You know that?" Gavin smirked, a condescending smile I'd never seen on his face before. "Jeremy, don't make this complicated. The company is changing and we need people who fit better. You'll receive a small severance package, enough to tide you over for a while. Today is your last day. HR will guide you through the paperwork." He spoke as if reading a weather report, devoid of emotion or hesitation. The HR woman slid a stack of papers toward me, her eyes still fixed on the table as if she didn't want to witness the scene. Blood rushed to my head, my chest tightening as if squeezed. 8 years. 8 years of staring at numbers, staying up late to finish reports, revising every tiny detail to ensure perfection. The times I stayed at the office until midnight when the world was asleep, just to make sure my materials gave Sterling and Rowe the best analyses possible. I never sought the spotlight. And now they were telling me I was no longer needed? I looked straight into Gavin's eyes, searching for a shred of reason, an explanation. But in his gaze I saw only smugness. "Gavin," I said, my voice trembling with anger, "this isn't restructuring. This is a dirty game and you know it." He scoffed, stood up, and adjusted his tie as if posing for a photo. Jeremy, don't make yourself pathetic. You did well, but this world isn't for people who just keep their heads down and work. You should have learned to play the game. Now pack your things. Don't make me call security. His words hit like a punch to the face. I wanted to shout, to slam my fist on the table, to force him to admit the truth, that the team's successes, the big contracts, the praised projects were largely because of my work, not his. But I knew, in that room, I'd already lost before I even walked in. I left the meeting room with leaden feet, my mind reeling. The HR woman quietly handed me an envelope with details of the severance, a pitifully small sum, barely enough to cover a month's mortgage. I returned to my desk and packed my belongings into a cardboard box someone had left there. Small things, the coffee mug Sophia gave me for Father's Day, a tiny photo frame of our family, a notebook filled with meticulous notes, now just remnants of a life I thought was secure. Colleagues glanced at me. Some whispered, some avoided my eyes. Rachel, who once called me the machine, gave a silent nod, her eyes full of regret. As I stepped out of the Sterling and Row building, the October chill in Chicago slapped my face. I stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the gleaming windows where I'd spent nearly a decade of my life. Humiliation washed over me, as if the whole world was watching and mocking me. 8 years of dedication, 8 years of sweat and heart, only to be kicked out with an envelope and a few snide words from a cowardly manager. I realized this wasn't a random company decision. It was a trap, and Gavin Mercer was the one pulling the strings. He'd taken credit for my work, using my reports to build his reputation with the board, and now, when I was no longer useful, he'd discarded me without a second thought. I drove home, the familiar suburban roads suddenly feeling alien. Questions pounded like waves. How would I face Vanessa? How would I explain to Sophia that Daddy no longer had a job? How would we pay the mortgage, the bills, or even her school fees? The suburban house, which I once thought was untouchable, now loomed in my mind as an enormous burden. Our savings were modest, and that laughably small severance would run dry in weeks. I glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing my own face. Tired, bewildered. For the first time in my life, I felt utterly powerless. When I got home, I stepped inside, forcing a smile as Sophia ran to me, wrapping her arms around my legs as she always did. "Daddy's home." Her voice was clear and carefree, as if the world was still a place full of color. I picked her up, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, trying to let that warmth soothe the pain tearing at my heart. But when my eyes met Vanessa's, as she leaned against the kitchen doorway, I knew that fleeting dream of comfort was slipping away. That evening, after Sophia was fast asleep, I sat down at the dining table with Vanessa. The dim yellow light illuminated her face, but it no longer highlighted the beauty I'd once been captivated by. I took a deep breath, searching for the words to confess the truth weighing heavily on my chest. "Vanessa," I began, my voice hoarse. "Today the company let me go. They said my position was no longer needed." I paused, waiting for a reaction. A hug, a word of comfort, or even just a nod. But Vanessa only stared at me, her eyes filled with disappointment. "Let you go?" she repeated, her tone flat, devoid of emotion. "So what are you going to do now, Jeremy? How are we supposed to live with this house, with Sophia, with everything?" I tried to stay calm, though my heart felt like it was being squeezed. "I'll find a new job," I said, trying to sound certain. "I'll send out applications, reach out to contacts, do whatever it takes to get back on track. I promise." But Vanessa didn't respond with the encouragement I'd hoped for. She crossed her arms, looking at me as if sizing up a stranger. "You promise?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You worked there for 8 years, Jeremy. 8 years, and you couldn't even keep your job. Do you think your promises mean anything now?" Her words cut deeper than Gavin Mercer's sneers that morning. I wanted to argue, to say that I'd done everything, that I didn't deserve this. But I just sat there, silent, my heart heavy as lead. The weeks that followed turned my life into a spiral of anxiety and helplessness. The savings Vanessa and I had carefully set aside were meager, and the paltry severance from Sterling and Rowe dwindled faster than I'd expected. Utility bills, living expenses, and especially the mortgage payments for our suburban home piled up like boulders, crushing my chest every day. I tried to hide my panic, not wanting Vanessa or Sophia to see me weak. During the day, I sat at the computer sending job applications to dozens of companies, from major Chicago corporations to small firms I'd never heard of. I called old contacts, hoping for a lead, a crack of opportunity. But the job market was harsher than I'd imagined. Most responses were polite rejections. The rest were a terrifying silence. Each time I checked my inbox, my heart sank deeper. Vanessa, who had once been my emotional anchor, began to change. At first, she only sighed when she saw the stack of bills on the table. But those sighs soon turned into sharp accusations. "What did you do to get us into this mess, Jeremy?" she asked during one dinner after Sophia had gone to bed. "You weren't strong enough to keep your job, and now what? We're going to lose everything." I tried to explain, to say I was doing all I could, but she wouldn't listen. Our family dinners, once filled with laughter, became battlegrounds of bitter words. Vanessa was no longer the gentle woman by my side. She looked at me like a failure, and that hurt more than any rejection from employers. Sophia, my 6-year-old, remained as bright as sunshine. She didn't understand the bills, the sleepless nights I spent job hunting, or why her parents spoke less and less. But she sensed the tension. I saw it in the way she hesitated to ask for a new toy or clung to me longer each night, as if afraid I might disappear. I forced smiles for her, telling silly stories about princesses and dragons, but each time Vanessa snapped something cold. "Are you telling Sophia stories to escape reality, Jeremy?" My heart twisted. I wanted to shield Sophia from the truth, to keep her world vibrant, but I didn't know how when I was drowning in darkness. Our suburban home, once my castle, now felt suffocating. Sophia's laughter grew rare, replaced by arguments between Vanessa and me. Each time the phone rang, I hoped it was a job interview, but it was usually just the bank or creditors reminding us of looming payments. One morning, I opened the mailbox to find a letter from the bank among the bills. My heart stopped as I read the bolded words. "Warning. Failure to make timely payments may result in foreclosure of your property." I hid the letter in a drawer, not wanting Vanessa to see, but she already knew. That night, her patience exploded. "Jeremy, do you even see where we are?" Vanessa nearly shouted as I tried to reassure her I'd find a way. "We're about to lose the house. Lose everything. Do you think I can live like this in constant fear?" Her voice was icy, but what hurt most was what came next, delivered with cruel indifference. "I can't keep doing this. I need to find another way. For me, and for Sophia." Those words were a final cut, shredding the last of my hope. Vanessa didn't specify what another way meant, but her eyes, the way she turned away, told me she was considering a future without me. That night, after Vanessa went upstairs and Sophia was sound asleep, I sat alone in the living room, the dim light casting shadows on the family photo on the shelf. I looked at my face in the picture, the man who once believed he could protect this home from any storm. Now I saw only a failure, discarded by my job, abandoned by my wife, and facing the loss of everything. The happiness I'd poured my heart into preserving was now crumbling at its roots. In the days following the argument with Vanessa, I lived like a shadow in my own home. I no longer had the strength to hide my despair. In my desperation, I thought of my parents, Warren and Eleanor Whitfield. They were the last anchor I could cling to. My parents, in their 60s and retired, lived in a small but comfortable house. They led a relatively comfortable life thanks to the money from selling the old house my grandparents had left them a few years ago. When I was still stably employed at Sterling and Rowe, I regularly sent money to help my parents with home repairs, medications, or small expenses. It was my way of showing filial piety, a son's duty I never questioned. I thought surely they would understand my situation. Surely they would extend a hand to help when I was standing on the edge of a cliff. I drove to their house one weekend afternoon under a gray Chicago sky that matched my mood. The house of my childhood appeared before me with its white picket fence and the small garden my mother still tended. I took a deep breath before knocking, mentally rehearsing my words. I wasn't planning to beg for much, just a small loan, enough to cover the mortgage for a few months, to keep a roof over Sophia's head, to buy me time to find a job. I told myself my parents would understand, that they wouldn't let their son fall into ruin. My father, Warren, opened the door. He was the same as ever, tall and thin with a stern face etched with deep wrinkles. "Jeremy," he said, his voice flat, showing neither surprise nor joy. "Come in." My mother, Eleanor, was sitting in an armchair in the living room holding a cup of tea. She gave a faint smile, but her eyes avoided mine as if she already guessed why I was there. I sat down, feeling like a child about to be scolded. "Dad, Mom," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm in trouble. I lost my job and things are really bad. I just need a small loan to cover the mortgage to keep a home for Sophia. I promise I'll pay it back as soon as I find a new job." The air in the room grew heavier. My father frowned, his lips tightening as if I'd said something offensive. "Lost your job?" he asked, his voice icy. "How did you let that happen, Jeremy? What did you do to end up like this?" I tried to explain, talking about the restructuring, about Gavin Mercer, about how I was unfairly pushed out of Sterling and Rowe. But the more I spoke, the darker my father's expression became. "Don't make excuses," he cut me off. "You weren't smart enough to keep your job. And now you want us to bail you out? At our age, your mother and I can't clean up the mess you've made for yourself. Helping you now would be like throwing money out the window." His words hit me like a slap. I looked to my mother, hoping she'd say something, anything to soften the blow. But she just sat there, her eyes fixed on her teacup, her hands gripping it tightly as if bracing for a storm. "Mom," I called, my voice almost pleading. She looked up, a flicker of pity in her eyes, but then she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Jeremy, you need to stand on your own. We're old now, we can't keep taking care of you." Her words, though gentle, hurt more than my father's harshness. My mother, who once hugged me and called me her good boy, now chose to side with my father, choosing silence over defending me. I was stunned. For 8 years, I'd sent them money every month, sometimes cutting back on my own family's expenses. I did it not expecting repayment, but because I believed it was a son's duty. But now, when I needed them most, when I faced losing everything, they turned their backs. I looked at my father, then my mother, and realized a bitter truth. In their eyes, I was only valuable when I was successful, when I brought pride and money. When I failed, I became a burden, someone not worth their concern. I stood up, the air in the room pressing down on me. "Thank you," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'll figure it out." My father only nodded, and my mother still wouldn't look at me. I walked out of the house where I'd grown up, the place I once thought was the safest in the world. The path to the gate now felt endless, each step pulling me deeper into an abyss. My heart shattered. Not only had I lost my job, not only had Vanessa turned away, but now my own parents had disowned me. The people I thought would always be there saw me as a stranger. When I got home, night had fallen. The living room's dim light cast a weak glow, reflecting off silent walls. Gone were the laughter, the familiar smell of food. Only an eerie emptiness remained. Vanessa was sitting on the sofa, surrounded by neatly packed suitcases. Sophia sat close to her, clutching the doll I'd bought for her last birthday. I stood frozen, my heart seeming to stop. "Jeremy, I can't keep living like this," Vanessa said, her voice calm but cruel. "I need a different life. For me and Sophia." I stared at her, unable to comprehend her words. Each one cut into my heart like a slow, deliberate knife. My mind echoed with memories of family dinners, movie nights, Sophia's laughter as I chased her around the room. How could it all vanish with a few cold words? I searched Vanessa's eyes for a hint of hesitation, a a trace of the love we once had, but there was only a void. She stood, pulled her suitcase, and took Sophia's hand. "Mommy, is Daddy coming too?" Sophia's voice was small and trembling like a fragile thread. I wanted to say something, to fall to my knees, to hold my daughter, but my throat was choked. Every word stuck in my chest where my heart pounded as if it might burst. Vanessa didn't answer. She just tightened her grip on Sophia's hand and opened the door. The door slammed shut, its echo reverberating through the house like a verdict. I stood there for a long time, in the darkness and heavy silence. Everything around me seemed to dissolve. The chair she sat in, the glass she held, even the air carried the scent of loss. Then I sat down, head in my hands, unable to distinguish tears from sweat. The feeling wasn't just pain. It was emptiness. An emptiness so profound that even despair couldn't find the strength to surface. That night I realized I had lost everything. Not just my pride, my wife, my daughter, but the very reason to keep living. The months that followed felt like I was living as a ghost, trapped in a spiral of exhaustion and helplessness. I was no longer the proud man with a stable job and a complete family. Now I was just a failure, abandoned by the world and rejected by the people I loved most. In moments when darkness enveloped the house and the silence became unbearable, dark thoughts crept into my mind. I wondered if it was worth living on. I had lost my job, Vanessa, Sophia, and even my parents' respect. What was left to hold on to? A house on the verge of foreclosure? A pile of unpaid bills? The thought of giving up, of ending it all, passed like a cold breeze. It wasn't strong enough to pull me under, but it sent shivers through me. I wasn't one to give up easily, but when the world seemed to have forsaken you, what was left to fight for? I had no answers. I just sat there, letting the pain and emptiness gnaw at the fragments of my soul. Then on a gray morning, as I checked my empty mailbox for the umpteenth time, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, assuming it was another call from a creditor chasing mortgage payments or reminding me of unpaid debts. But a strange instinct made me answer. "Hello, Jeremy Whitfield speaking," I said, my voice hoarse, expecting nothing more than a pointless conversation. "Hello, Mr. Whitfield," a polite female voice came from the other end. "This is Laura, assistant to Mr. Alexander Rowe, chairman of Sterling and Rowe Investments. Mr. Rowe would like to meet with you to discuss some matters related to the company. Are you available to come to our headquarters on Wednesday at 10 a.m.? I nearly dropped the phone. Alexander Rowe, the chairman of Sterling and Rowe, the man I only knew from speeches at company-wide meetings, someone I'd never met in person during my 8 years there? I stammered, my mind reeling. You mean Mr. Rowe wants to meet me? But why? I've already been let go." My voice trembled, a mix of shock and suspicion. Laura's tone remained steady, professional. "I don't have specific details, Mr. Whitfield. But Mr. Rowe has requested to meet you. Can you make it?" I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Yes, I'll be there." When the call ended, I sat frozen, still clutching the phone as if it were my last lifeline to the world. Alexander Rowe wanted to meet me, a low-level employee who'd been unceremoniously fired. I didn't understand. For 8 years at Sterling and Rowe, I was just a faceless name under Gavin Mercer, diligently working on spreadsheets and reports that I hoped contributed to the company's success. I'd never stood before the board, never received direct praise from anyone at the top. So why now, when I'd hit rock bottom, did he want to see me? I spent the rest of the day thinking, trying to figure out the reason. Was this a mistake, a mix-up, or a cruel prank to push me deeper into the abyss? But deep down, a tiny spark flickered, like a fragile flame in a cold wind. I had lost everything, my job, my family, my self-respect. But if this was a chance, however slim, I had to seize it. I stood up and stepped onto the balcony, looking down at the quiet suburban street. The sky was still gray, but somewhere a faint ray of sunlight was trying to break through the clouds. I took a deep breath, feeling a sliver of life return. This meeting might lead nowhere, but for the first time in weeks, I felt I had a reason to take a step forward, even if it was just a small one. On Wednesday morning, I dressed as neatly as I could and drove to the Sterling and Rowe headquarters, the gleaming glass skyscraper in the heart of Chicago. Stepping into the lobby, I felt like an outsider. Employees in sharp suits hurried past, their eyes indifferent, as if I didn't exist. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the lingering humiliation from the day I left with a cardboard box of personal belongings. The receptionist directed me to the top floor where Alexander Rowe's office was located. As the elevator doors closed in that brief moment, my heart pounded as if I were standing at a fateful crossroads. Laura, Mr. Rowe's assistant, greeted me at the office door. She gave a polite smile and led me into a spacious room with windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Alexander Rowe sat behind his desk, a man in his 60s with silver hair and piercing eyes. He stood, shaking my hand with a firm grip. "Thank you for coming, Jeremy," he said, his voice deep and calm. "Have a seat." I sat down, feeling like a schoolboy awaiting a reprimand, though I had no idea what I'd done wrong. "You must be wondering why I wanted to meet you," Mr. Rowe began, his gaze locking onto mine as if he could read my every thought. I nodded, not daring to speak, afraid my voice would tremble. He continued, "We recently conducted an internal review, and I'll be blunt. The strategic reports and analyses your team produced over the past few years, most of that was your work, wasn't it?" I blinked, unsure if I'd heard correctly. I worked on a lot of reports, sir. But I was just part of the team under Gavin Mercer's management. I tried to keep my tone neutral, but Gavin's name left a bitter taste in my throat. Mr. Rowe frowned, shaking his head. "Yes, that's what Gavin wanted us to believe. But we reviewed the original documents, Jeremy. Every edit, every note, every detailed analysis, they all bear your mark." Gavin merely changed the names on the reports and presented them as his own. His words hit me like a jolt of electricity. My head buzzed with a mix of shock and anger. "You mean Gavin took credit for my work?" I asked, my voice hoarse, though deep down I already knew the answer. Mr. Rowe nodded, his eyes now filled with disappointment, but not for me. "Not just yours, Jeremy. Over the years, Gavin has taken credit for the work of many others to advance his career, but you were hit the hardest. Your analyses helped the company secure major contracts, yet your name was never mentioned, and during the restructuring, Gavin made sure you were the one let go." I sat there, stunned. 8 years. 8 years of poring over numbers, staying up late to finish reports, revising every detail to ensure perfection. I never sought the spotlight, only hoping my efforts would be recognized through the team's success. But now I knew the truth. Gavin had stolen everything, from the praise to the opportunities I could have had. He'd built his career on my sweat, and when I was no longer useful, he'd cast me out with a smug smirk. Mr. Rowe continued, "I'm deeply disappointed by the dishonesty in our management team. Gavin Mercer was terminated as soon as we uncovered the truth. And Jeremy, I want to right this wrong. I'd like to invite you back to Sterling and Rowe, not in your old role, but as head of strategic analysis. You'll have a direct voice in projects, no longer held back by anyone. You deserve it." My mind reeled. From a man who had lost everything, my job, my family, my self-respect, I was now being invited back not just to work, but to a higher position, a chance to prove my worth. It was a shocking reversal, as if fate had played an unexpected card. But instead of elation, a bitter resentment simmered within me. 8 years of dedication, 8 years of being exploited, twisted to serve someone else's ambition. I had lost so much, not just my job, but my family, my trust in those around me. Mr. Rowe's offer was a ray of light, but it couldn't erase the scars left by Gavin and the months that followed. I looked at Mr. Rowe, searching for words. "Thank you, sir," I said, my voice low but steady. "I'll come back and give my all to the company." He nodded, his eyes seeming to see into my core. "Good. I know you'll do well." As I left the office and stepped out of the skyscraper, Chicago's chill no longer made me shiver. I stood on the sidewalk, watching the bustling crowd, feeling as if I'd just emerged from a strange dream. This meeting hadn't just restored my career, it marked a profound change in me. I was no longer the meek Jeremy Whitfield who quietly endured. The months of betrayal, by Gavin, by Vanessa, by my own parents, had made me see the world through different eyes. I no longer blindly trusted others' kindness, no longer let myself be used. I walked away, feeling a new strength growing inside me, not for revenge, but to protect myself. The day I returned to Sterling and Rowe Investments, the Chicago sky was still gray, but I no longer felt the biting cold as I once had. I walked into the glass skyscraper, the same place I'd left months ago, clutching a cardboard box filled with the fragments of my life. This time, I wasn't Jeremy Whitfield, the low-level employee hunched over a desk. I was the head of strategic analysis, a position Alexander Rowe had given me, not just to right the company's wrong, but to acknowledge what I should have been recognized for long ago. Dressed in a new suit, I stood tall, but inside I carried scars that hadn't healed. With each step through the lobby, I felt the eyes of colleagues, surprised, curious, and tinged with envy. Whispers trailed behind me. "Jeremy? He's back? Or I heard he got promoted. Unbelievable." I didn't blame them. Just months ago, I was the one fired, leaving in humiliation, mocked by my own manager. Now I was back, not just with a job, but with greater authority, a higher salary, and a chance to prove my true worth. My new office wasn't the cramped corner with the old wooden desk. It was on a higher floor with windows overlooking Chicago's skyline and a team reporting directly to me. But as I sat in the new leather chair, gazing at the computer screen flickering with familiar numbers, I didn't feel the triumphant joy I'd expected. Instead, there was a cold emptiness, as if all I'd achieved today couldn't fill the void of what I'd lost. On my second day in the new role, I ran into Gavin Mercer. I was leaving my office to grab coffee in the lobby when I saw him at the end of the hallway near the elevators. He no longer wore the expensive gray suit I was used to seeing. Instead, he had on a worn jacket clutching a cardboard box, identical to the one I'd carried when I was let go. His face was gaunt, his eyes betraying stress. He stopped when he saw me, and for a moment the air between us froze. I remembered the meeting room months ago where he sat at the head of the table, smirking as he told me I was no longer needed. His words, "This world isn't for people who just keep their heads down and work," still echoed in my mind, sharp as a blade. "Jeremy," he said, his voice dry, forcing a strained smile. "Heard you're back. Congratulations." I looked straight into his eyes, not returning the smile. "Gavin," I replied, my voice even but cold as ice, "I'm not here for your congratulations." He blinked, as if surprised by my response. "Still bitter?" he asked, a hint of mockery in his tone, but I could hear the unease beneath it. "Bitter?" I echoed, stepping closer so he could see the change in my eyes. "No, Gavin. I'm just no longer the guy you can exploit. You stole my work for 8 years, and now what? You're standing here with that box while I'm in the place you dreamed of." He opened his mouth, about to say something, but then fell silent. I didn't give him a chance to respond. I turned and walked back to my office, a surge of strength coursing through me. In that meeting room months ago, I was the victim, the one fired with a pitiful severance envelope. Now I was the victor, not because I brought Gavin down, but because I rose from the ashes he left behind. He'd been sacked, his reputation shattered, while I was rebuilding, this time with my name on the work. The new job wasn't easy, but it was a chance to prove my true value. I led the analysis team, crafting strategies that helped Sterling and Rowe secure major contracts. The numbers, charts, and forecasts, my beloved language, were still there, but now I worked in the light, not the shadows. My name appeared in meetings, on reports, and in praise from leadership. Colleagues began to see me differently. No longer the machine buried in spreadsheets, but someone with a voice. Someone worthy of respect. I felt the change not just in how others saw me, but in how I saw myself. Yet every evening when I returned to the suburban house, that success felt hollow. The house was still empty, devoid of Sophia's laughter or Vanessa's sharp gaze. I'd walk into the living room, the dim yellow light illuminating the family photo on the shelf, and my heart would ache. My career might be reviving, but the emotional wounds remained, bleeding every time I faced the void left by my wife and daughter. I'd sit on the sofa, listening to the wind howl through the windows, wondering if everything I was doing was worth it. I'd reclaimed justice at work, but my family, the most important thing to me, was now a distant memory. As the days passed, I began to see things through a new lens. This return wasn't just about rebuilding my career, it was a chance to reassess the relationships that had once confined me. My parents, Warren and Eleanor, who turned their backs when I needed them most, taught me that family ties aren't always unconditional. Vanessa, who left with Sophia when I hit rock bottom, showed me that love can't survive on material stability alone. And Gavin, who stole my work to build his reputation, made me realize that blind kindness only makes you prey. I used to be a gentleman, always putting others first, but now I saw that gentleness had cost me dearly. I'm no longer the Jeremy Whitfield of before. I've endured loss, touched the depths of despair, and learned to stand again. I no longer let myself be exploited or bow to those who see me as a tool. I began setting boundaries, not to build walls, but to protect my dignity. Each morning as I drove to Sterling and Row, I felt a new Jeremy taking shape, not for revenge, but to live a life I could be proud of. Chicago's morning bustle was as lively as ever, but the honking cars and frenetic pace no longer suffocated me. I walked into the office with my head held high, no longer the man who bowed before a desk. I was the head of strategic analysis, a person with a voice, with value, and for the first time in my life, I felt I truly belonged here. Yet despite the glow of my newfound success, the scars in my heart remained unhealed. And as news of my promotion spread, shadows from my past began to resurface, like vultures sensing an opportunity. Word of my return to Sterling and Row, not just to a job but to a higher position, quickly spread through Chicago's financial circles. Former colleagues whispered during meetings, their eyes a mix of surprise and curiosity. Jeremy Whitfield? How did he climb to that position? I overheard someone say in the break room. I didn't care. They didn't need to know what I'd been through to get here. The sleepless nights, the days of despair, the moments I nearly crumbled. But what I hadn't expected was that the news wouldn't stay confined to the office. It reached my family, it reached Vanessa, and like a toxic breeze, it brought back figures I thought I'd left behind. One afternoon, after wrapping up a meeting, my phone buzzed. My father's number, Warren, flashed on the screen. I stared at it, my heart pounding, not with joy, but with a sense of wariness. How long had it been since I stood before my parents, begging for a small loan to keep a roof over Sophia's head, only to be met with harsh words and cold stares? I took a deep breath and answered. Jeremy, my father's voice came through, still stern, but with a softer edge than usual. Your mother and I heard you're doing well at the company. We've been worried about you. It's been a while. Why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? I gripped the phone tightly, a smoldering anger rising in my chest. Worried about me? I remembered the house of my childhood, the place I once thought was my safest haven. I remembered my father's scowl as he said helping me was throwing money out the window. I remembered my mother, Eleanor, sitting silently, not daring to defend me. Worried about me? I replied, my voice calm but sharp. When I needed you most, what did you say? That I had to stand on my own, that you couldn't carry my burdens. Now that I've stood up, what do you want? A family dinner to make amends? My father fell silent on the other end, then let out a sigh, his voice tinged with unease. Jeremy, we're family. We just want things to go back to how they were. But I was no longer the Jeremy of old, the one who'd overlook everything for the sake of family. I looked out my office window, sunlight glinting off the skyscrapers, and realized a bitter truth. My parents' affection existed only when I had material value, when I brought them pride and benefits. When I hit rock bottom, they turned away. Now that I'd risen, they wanted back into my life. "Dad, Mom," I said, my voice firm, "thank you for calling, but I don't need those dinners. I have my own life now." I hung up, feeling as if I'd shed a heavy burden, though my heart still ached. Less than a week later, Vanessa reached out. She called me one evening as I sat in the empty suburban house. "Jeremy?" Her voice came through the phone, softer than I'd heard in months. "Sophia misses you. She asks about you every day. I think maybe we should talk. For Sophia, for a complete family." Those words pierced like a dagger, not because they hurt, but because I knew they weren't genuine. I remembered Vanessa's cold gaze as she left, taking Sophia and her suitcases, abandoning me in a house on the brink of foreclosure. She wasn't coming back because she loved me, or even for Sophia. She was coming back because of the news of my promotion, because the stability she once valued had returned. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. "Vanessa, I'll always be Sophia's father. I'll do anything for her, anytime. But you and me? That ended the day you walked out." She went silent, then tried to persuade me, her voice sweeter. "Jeremy, I know I was wrong, but we can start over for her." But I no longer believed those words. I saw the truth clearly. Vanessa didn't want me. She wanted security, the glow of a successful man. I hung up, not out of anger, but because I knew I couldn't let her back into my life, couldn't let myself be hurt again. These decisions, though difficult, brought me a peace I'd never known. I realized that freedom and dignity mattered more than any relationship, whether bound by blood or marriage, if it was built on exploitation. I was no longer the Jeremy Whitfield of the past, the one who sacrificed himself to please others. I'd learned to say no, to stand firm against those who saw me as a tool. Each morning as I walked into Sterling and Rowe, I carried not just my skills but a new resolve. A resolve to live for myself, to protect what I'd rebuilt from the ashes. As time passed, I settled into my role as head of strategic analysis at Sterling and Rowe. The projects I led not only generated profits but also laid the groundwork for the company's long-term strategies. I was no longer the man working behind the scenes, toiling over numbers in obscurity. My name appeared in reports, in praise from leadership, and in the respectful gazes of colleagues. During one major meeting, Alexander Rowe stood and declared, "Jeremy Whitfield has proven that integrity and true talent will always find their light." Those words made me pause, not out of pride, but because I realized how far I'd come from the days when I was just a nameless shadow. In the months that followed, Vanessa continued trying to reach me. One evening, as I returned to the suburban house, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find her standing there, her glossy brown hair catching the porch light, her sharp eyes now tinged with hesitation. "Jeremy," she said softly, a far cry from the coldness she'd shown when she left with Sophia. "I'm here for Sophia. She misses you. I think maybe we should try again for her, for what we once had." I looked at her, my heart aching at the mention of Sophia's name. But my reason reminded me of the day she walked out, pulling her suitcase and leaving me in darkness. She didn't speak of love, didn't express regret. She only spoke of Sophia, and I knew that behind her words was the stability she'd once left me to chase, now reappearing in my life. "Vanessa," I said, my voice calm but resolute, "I'll always be Sophia's father. I'll see her, care for her, do anything for her. But you and me? That ended the day you walked away." She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand to stop her. "You don't need to say more. I know what you want, but I can't give it to you." She looked at me, a flicker of hurt in her eyes, but then she turned and walked down the suburban street she'd once abandoned. I closed the door, feeling a strange sense of peace. I was no longer the weak man afraid of losing his wife and daughter. I had become an independent father, strong enough to protect Sophia without relying on a rotten marriage. I kept in touch with Sophia, picking her up on weekends, taking her for ice cream, listening to her stories about new friends at school. Each time I saw her smile, my heart warmed as if my love for her was the only flame that never dimmed. But I didn't let Vanessa use Sophia as an excuse to re-enter my life. I set clear boundaries, not to push my daughter away, but to protect the pure love I had for her. To me, revenge wasn't about tearing down or causing pain to those who betrayed me. Gavin had lost everything: his position, his reputation, his self-respect. My parents lived with the regret of realizing the son they once saw as a burden had surpassed their reach. Vanessa faced the truth that she no longer had a place in my life. But I took no joy in their failures. My revenge was living better, stronger, and ensuring they could never touch my life again. I rebuilt my life on a firmer foundation, a prestigious career, self-respect, and the pure love I had for Sophia. Looking back, I realized that the shocks, losing my job, my family, being abandoned by my parents, were necessary lessons. They forced me to confront the truth that blind kindness only made me a victim. Only when I learned to set boundaries to protect my dignity did I find true freedom and happiness. I was no longer the Jeremy Whitfield of old, the one who sacrificed himself to please others. I had stepped out of the darkness, no longer trapped by betrayal. One morning, as I took Sophia for a walk in the park, she held my hand, looking up with a radiant smile. "Daddy, I drew a picture at school today. Want to see it?" I knelt down, pulling her into a hug, my heart overflowing. "Of course, princess," I said, smiling. As we walked under the sunlight, I looked up at the clear blue sky, not a gray cloud in sight. I knew that no matter how painful the past had been, I had found my own path, a path free of betrayal's shadows, filled only with the light of what I cherished most.